Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. My guest today is Renu Juneja, and she is head of scientific evidence and communications at Johnson and Johnson. And we talk about her three mantras for core values and leadership. It's really an awesome conversation. I learned a lot. I think you guys are going to like it. Don't forget to follow me on LinkedIn and join us for MSL Talk Live, which is once a month. And we announced that on LinkedIn. It's on the LinkedIn platform. So please check those out. And we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you for all your support. Welcome to MSL Talk with Tom Caravela, a podcast specifically designed for MSLs and all things field medical. Hey, Renu, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me. How are you?
Good, Tom. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me and giving me this opportunity.
Yeah,
Really
I am
appreciate it.
excited. I'm really excited. So, guys, I've known Renu for a while. Um, See her at conferences. We met probably at MAPS, getting ready to see Renu at MAPS coming up this weekend in Puerto Rico. So this was just a great way for us to collaborate and kick off, all the conversations that we've been having. I think you guys are going to enjoy this. Before we get into this topic, Renu, why don't you introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are and where you're from and all that good stuff?
Sure. Thank you. So I am working at Johnson and Johnson, U.S. Medical Affairs Oncology. And, over my tenure at Novo Nordisk, then MedImmune, AstraZeneca, and now Johnson and Johnson, I have been in medical affairs for over 25 years and have almost, touched all aspects of medical affairs. Medical affairs strategy, business planning, budget, data generation, data communication, MSL resources and training. So yes, have been through this journey, and touching on many different aspects of medical affairs.
And that's kind of a humble way. Like Renu is like literally an expert and leader in medical affairs. So that was like a humble introduction. You guys will see by the time we're done with this conversation, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Well, thank you for joining. Before we get into the conversation, I want to announce that this episode is sponsored by Fierce Life Sciences. And guys, I've been talking about this for a while. You really need to sign up for Mass East, the Medical Affairs Strategic Summit East. This year, it's going to be in Jersey City, May 6th through the 8th. It is the premier event for you to connect with medical affairs leaders across pharma for 3 days of focused learning and fun networking. So elevate your expertise at Mass East this year. Listeners of the MSL Talk podcast can get 25% off registration. Just use the code MSL TALK, all one word. And you go to medaffairssummit.com or just go to your browser and type in Mass East 2024. So we will see you guys in Jersey City. Let's jump into this topic. We're going to talk about the importance of core values and leadership. And this was a topic that came to me. Renu and I were having a conversation, and this topic came up. I said, you know what? We haven't really covered that. So we're going to dive into it. But I'd love, Renu, for you to just talk a little bit more about your background, because I think it sets the tone for this core values discussion. I know you grew up in India. Is that correct?
Correct. That is correct. And before I get into this, Tom, I would just like to put a disclaimer out that all, what I'm going to express here or my opinion, these are just my opinions and not of my employer or anybody else. Just a, disclaimer to get it out of the way.
Great.
But you're right. I grew up in a very small town in India. And, I was the first woman, that time a young girl, from my high school class who left that little town to go to a prep school in a city. Because I realized that if I want to get in a good school, good program, I needed that exposure. I'm just not going to make that big jump from small little town to, a big school in a city. So I went to prep school after 10th grade, 16 years old, left my town and my home, and did my undergraduation and master's in biochemistry. Then went to a pretty big Medical Research Institute and did my PhD there in reproductive biology. Always had a dream of, coming to US for postdoctoral fellowship, but it was a dream at that time, I must say. During my PhD, I got married, defended my thesis, had my daughter, and then, started applying for postdoctoral fellowship, got in 3 places, decided to take a Rockefeller Foundation fellowship and come to Rockefeller University. We arrived at JFK in September of 1991, with my husband, 10-month-old baby, 5 suitcases, and $835 in our pocket.
And a dream.
That's all we could gather. Yes. And big dream of having my lab, my students, my academia and grants and everything. And then reality sets in.
Yeah.
And, I realized how hard it was, academic career. More so being a woman and a colored woman.
Yeah.
Right? Woman of color, right? So was difficult. Long story short, pivoted to a pharmaceutical industry, got my first job as a medical writer, and rest is history.
Amazing.
Yeah,
that's amazing. Yeah, and you've done so well. You've had such an amazing, tremendous career. So I'm so glad we started with that. It really sets the tone for the conversation. And let's jump into it. Because I want to start with, if you could talk about what you mean by core values and tell us a little bit more about how important that was for you, not just earlier in your career, but how you've developed your career based on your core values.
Yes, sure. Yeah. So when I look at Tom, or I think about core values, they really mean my guiding principles, my anchor, my inner compass, and as you said that, yes, I had core values, or I think, ever since I remember, I have had core values, but they did evolve over time. And also they became more important as my career progressed, and I listened to your podcast on core values, one day driving in from work. And as you have said that, they are deep-rooted beliefs, right? They are really your driving force kind of thing. I think that's what it really is, that where do you go to, what principles do you follow, as so to say, purpose of your life, or as main, driver of your life, right? So it has been always very important, core values. Even when I was growing up in that small town, those I didn't realize at that time. I must say, I did not realize at that time that I was going back to my core values. I, realized that later on in my life. But the principles have been there, as far as I remember.
And I'll tell you, and I'm glad that you mentioned the podcast. I did a solo podcast about this topic because it's something that, not everybody will live by a set of core values or be in touch with their own core values. I know that it took me until I was much further in my career until I actually sat down with a mentor that said, hey, what do you value the most? What's most important to you? Because knowing that piece helps guide, as you said, it helps to guide you. It also helps you to make decisions on who you want to work with, who do you want to work for, how you're going to handle certain situations, what to say no to, what to say yes to. I think it's important that if you haven't done this yet, you should really consider sitting down and just go to the internet and type in core values list and get a list of them and say, okay, these are what's most important to me in my life: faith, family. For me, it's fitness and service. There's a lot of different things, but you have to decide what's most important for you. So let me ask you, Renu, you had mentioned 3 mantras of core values. So what are those 3 mantras that you mentioned to me?
Sure. Yeah. So before I mention those, Tom, I know you much better now after, listening to your core values podcast. I know who you are as a person, not as a professional or what you do, but who you are as a person, and I can really appreciate, listening to your core values. And it gave me, like, I would say, deeper insight into who you are, So thank you for sharing that. So yes, my 3 mantras. First is CEO mentality. Second one is nobody wants to do a lousy job on purpose. And the third one is being fair and consistent. I mean, it sounds simple, those things, but, very sometimes difficult to live by day in and day out. But they kind of guide you. They kind of help you center. They definitely center me. Don't let me sway to two extremes, but, really bring me back and center me. But yes, CEO mentality, nobody wants to do a lousy job on purpose, and being fair and consistent.
I love that. I think those are great. And I think that they really speak to the caliber and quality of the type of leader that you are, hearing that. And again, hopefully that gives others some inspiration to figure out, okay, what are mine and what's most important to me? Or maybe just look at that as inspiration in their own careers. So a core value can be one word. It could be a phrase. It could be a sentence. It doesn't just have to be one specific thing. But I like the way you broke it down into 3 specific different mantras, as you call them, and use them as your guiding principles. And would you say, like, do these help you in the decision-making process in your life, would you say?
Definitely. And, and they're not just your professional core values, right? In your professional lives. Sometimes they do help me in my personal. I mean, in personal life, I have a couple of others too, but they do help me make decisions. Like in CEO mentality, as you know, things are not black and white. They're not just, there are many different shades of gray, more than I would like them to be, right? So every time I'm in that situation, I ask myself, what would a CEO do? I am CEO of this team, this function, this department. What would a CEO do in this situation? Not Renu, what would Renu do? What would an individual do? But looking, and CEO, in my mind, CEO's core responsibility is taking care of your team members, your function, as well as balancing it with what you have to deliver for the business, right? I do think it's a balance. It's never should be, delivering results at the cost of people, or taking care of people and not delivering results, right? There is always that good balance between the two things. So it really helps me think through, what would a CEO do? Or if I am a CEO hat, wearing that hat, what would I do in that case? Like when I was doing my PhD, the topic I was working on, I was CEO of that, right? First time I wrote that manuscript, being a medical writer, I was CEO. I knew more about that data and publication than anybody else, right? Similarly, as I, grew in my career, progressed in my career, CEO of my team, CEO of my function, or CEO of, department. Doesn't matter what, smaller or bigger team. Now, the second one, nobody wants to do a lousy job on purpose. This has actually, I think I have been pleasantly surprised, I would say many times, by following that mantra. Because every time somebody is not performing, or something is not, results are not being, delivered in time, or something is happening in the team, my first question that pops up in my head is, what's going on here? What's going on? Not just, oh, it's a performance issue, let's put it on performance improvement plan, or da. In my mind, that's a simple way. That's an easier way to go, right? But as a leader, especially 360 leader, who cares about people beyond 9 to 5, right? I do think about that. What's going on? Is there something going on in their personal lives that's impacting the work? Or communication and goals are not clear to them, so they don't know what they are supposed to deliver? Or the job has evolved so much that now their skills are not aligned with their, responsibilities, right? So in all these 3 cases, I think leaders have more responsibility to think about it and, really dig deeper into it than just kind of, oh, this person is not working out. Let's just get this person out. And as I said, pleasantly surprised, because when I have worked on those principles and worked on this second mantra, I see people turn around. You help them during their downtime or their low time, and people just become motivated, and you get benefit in the long term, not just during that time, but their motivation, their dedication, you get it for long term in their careers.
Yeah.
So it really has worked out well for me.
There's so much to unpack in what you just said.
Yes.
So let me first start by saying that what I'm hearing from you is that there's this accountability that's happening in relation to these mantras, accountability to yourself. So it sounds like you hold yourself accountable to these core values and through these mantras by asking yourself questions. So you're questioning yourself. Is that a common practice for you? Is that what holds you accountable?
Yes, it's a common practice for me, because end of the day, I want to look myself in the mirror and say, I did the right thing. I stood by, right? I did the right by people,
Yeah.
Who are on my team, whose careers are kind of sort of in my hand, right? So I did right by them. I didn't take an easy way out. I really dug deep. And sometimes, we all are human beings. We all have highs and lows of life, right? Going on. So if we don't support them during their, low times, then that's a shame in my mind.
Yeah.
That's not aligned with my core values. So I definitely hold myself accountable.
But you hold yourself accountable by checking in and asking yourself these questions, but you're holding other people accountable as well to this standard.
Absolutely. I mean, I have had many people who have said, you have been the best boss and the toughest boss. You have been the supportive boss, but really holding us accountable boss. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. Without that, you can't deliver results. You can't do things, right? So yes, I mean, it's all, as long as they know I have their back and they know I'll support them. But at the same time, they know that I'll hold them accountable when things are not being delivered in time or with quality, right? Kind of thing.
It's as timing would have it, I heard an expression last week that's perfect for what you just said. So obviously you have good relationships with your people and you're able to hold them accountable. Accountability without a relationship is harassment. Accountability with a relationship is love.
Wow. That is deep.
It's deep.
Definitely deep. Yes.
But it makes sense, because when you have good relationships with your people and you hold them accountable to a certain standard, you're doing it to support them and their career, or maybe them personally. But that accountability piece is out of love, really.
Definitely. I mean, I throughout my career, I have had people, who came in, didn't believe in themselves, right?
Yeah.
They didn't know their own potential, right? And I always believe that a good leader actually brings out the potential in people that they don't even know they have it.
Yeah.
That's like a really good, deep relationship and good leadership combined together, and holding them accountable, of course. Otherwise you can't deliver results. But that is deep. Yeah, that accountability without is harassment, or with care it is all love. Yes, that's deep. Yes.
And we keep using, so we're using the word leaders and leadership, but would you say that this concept of core values also applies to individual contributors and MSLs? And we're not just talking about leaders here, correct?
Yes, correct. Absolutely correct. In my mind, Tom, leadership is a state of mind. It's not a title. It's not a I was a leader, back when I was doing PhD, or I was a leader when I was, helping some women in my community or otherwise, right? In my mind, leadership doesn't start being a manager of other people or a director or whatever. It's not a title. It's a mindset, right? When you feel empowered, you feel you have things under control, you wear that CEO hat. I think that's leadership. That is totally leadership. And of course, yes, it is totally for any individual and every individual to, feel empowered and feel that they can control. It's hard work. It's hard work. I'm going to say that. It's not easy, sometimes to feel empowered, and sometimes, speaking up when the powers to be don't like you speaking up, right, in there. But it's worth it. It's all worth it. The leadership, you can be at any level, at any job, in any, hierarchy, any place, and you can be a leader if you choose to be.
I agree. I totally agree. So let's talk about getting back to developing core values and mantras like you did.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's not just for leaders. So there's a lot of people listening to this right now in a lot of different capacities, different levels. So how would you explain to them or guide them on how they could develop their own mantras and core values?
Yes. Yeah. I think as you said, Tom, in the beginning, it's not easy, right? It's not, sometimes don't know where to start or how to start in there. I personally would suggest that keep digging in to see what ticks me, what really excites me, what drives me, right? What do I think is the purpose of all that, my existence on this earth, basically, right? Why I'm here? What am I doing? If you keep digging it and keep, putting words or phrases or sentences, whatever comes to mind on a piece of paper, and keep going back to it and evolving it and enhancing it, I think you will get there. You will get there. And there is no magic number. I have 3 mantras, you may have 5, somebody may have 6, somebody may have 2. Who knows, right? What takes you and what excites you and motivates you and drives you. But I think just digging in, and it does take a lot of time to reflect, a lot of time to, sometimes it's too much. I have to kind of stop that tape in my head, keep going and going.
Yeah.
But it's you need to kind of, when our kids were little, I have 2 daughters, they were little, they would come back from school and we would say, it is now do nothing time. No TV, no homework, no games, nothing. It's do nothing time. Just sit and just think through your day, what happened, how did you react or act, or how did you behave here or there in your own head. You don't have to share with us, but it's just reflection time, right? Kind of thing. And I think we are in this speeded, life that we are always running from one thing to another. We just don't give ourselves that time to reflect. I feel sometimes.
Well, I agree. I think this is definitely a reflection exercise for sure. I think that's really a great way to describe how to do this, is to put yourself through a bit of a self reflection of sorts, and decide what's most important to you and what your guiding principles are, and start there, and try not to overthink it. Right? It doesn't have to be anything like I have 7 core values. Some people have 3. Like, it doesn't have to be a certain set number or certain thing. It does, like you said, it doesn't have to be words. It could be, phrases, whatever. Or maybe you start with 2 or 3 just to say, yeah, these things are important to me and I'm going to reflect on these. And I'm going to challenge myself each day against these core values to see how I did. Like you said with your kids, maybe just take a little bit of time each day and try to be introspective a little bit and think to yourself, okay, how did today go? What could have gone better? What should I have done? So would you say, because I try to do this, and I spend time in kind of meditation each day. What are the challenges that you see with this process and in being consistent with living by a set of core values?
Yeah, I mean, it's again slowing down, right? We are just on this, I sometimes feel on that gerbil, on that wheel, we just don't get off. Work to home, home to work, right? Kind of thing. Having that discipline, I mean, after so many years of working, now I have, boundaries and discipline on myself that after 6:30, I'm not going to touch my work phone till next day morning, unless I am expecting something, or there is something urgent project or things going on, right? Similarly, when I'm at work, I'm not going to keep checking my home email or personal email or reply to them or anything, right? So having those boundaries for yourself, discipline on yourself, right? Wherever you are, be there, be present and totally there, right? And I mean, totally do not believe in multitasking. I don't think multitasking even exists, or our brain can even take multitasking. When you're doing multiple things at the same time, you're going in and out of different things. You're not fully present. You're not 100% there, right? So for last many years now, I was actually in a leadership course where they, gave us an exercise which made it clear we were doing multiple things at the same time, and messing up every single thing. None of those things came out correct or right. So, I'm now a big believer of that. Where you are, you stay focused there, you do things there. And also living with your core values, you have to keep asking these questions to yourself. Am I living up to my core values? Is this the right decision to make? Or is this just an easy way out? Because I don't want to, confront somebody, or I don't want to stand up and speak up. Is that an easy way out? Or are you really living up to your values, right? And about consistency, you mentioned, I think it's an easy, everybody thinks, oh, consistency, yes. But when you start to implement, it's the toughest thing to do. Because, context changes, people change, environment change, right? So what you did last time is not, you can't implement that same thing this time, right? Consistency is not doing the same thing every time, is doing the right thing every time, right? But the context is different, environment is different, people are different. But I must say, Tom, that with time, as you keep doing this thing over and over again, and you have seen many different scenarios and many different situations, things do become easier. Because now you have seen not exactly the same situation, but similar situation. Not exactly the same context, but close, right? So it becomes easier as you practice it more and more and hold yourself to your core values.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think we have a really good quote that's going to come out of this. And you said consistency isn't doing the same thing all the time. It's doing the right thing. That's true consistency, is when you can make the right decisions. And I think that's why it's so important to be in touch with these values, because that's what's going to help you in that decision-making process. So I think this is such a great conversation. Like, can we shift a little bit to, because as I'm thinking, I want to get this, I want to get your advice for MSLs and even MSL leaders, just in what you see they, maybe what they can do better in this day and age, as you look, because you see a lot and you're in touch with a lot of different, being involved with MAPS and going to all of these conferences and being a part of such a large company. You see so much. So what's your advice to MSLs and MSL leaders these days?
Yeah, so I would say, first of all, for MSL leaders, my hat's off to them, that because during pandemic, right, it was hard. Everybody's job was hard, right? But for them, who external facing jobs, right, MSL leaders, how they handled those scientific exchanges and information getting to HCPs when everything was shut down, right? So first of all, my hat's off to them. I'm sure they were asking those questions to themselves that, they had to motivate themselves, especially when everything around them was shutting off. And none of us had seen that situation before. None of us knew that how to kind of survive or work in a pandemic, because we hadn't seen it for the last 100 years, right? So I think, I'm sure they were asking these questions to themselves. What motivates me? How, what makes me keep going in these jobs? But I hope they were also asking, what are my core values? Am I living up to my core values? Am I doing right by my team, right? But in future, or in these times, one thing I would say is That pandemic was, yes, once in 100 years thing, but we could see its impact, or how medically we understood it's a pandemic, it's infectious thing, contagious, it's causing all that stuff or whatever. But now the changes that are happening in MSL's world, or in medical affairs, actually, honestly, we see little bit above the surface, but a huge changes under the surface. And what I mean by that is generative AI, right? I mean, platforms, technology, social media. And during pandemic, HCPs learned that we don't need to meet with MSLs, or even for that matter, Salesforce all the time. We can still get answers to our questions. We can go to a platform, we can search for our answers, we can get it when we need it and how we need it, right? And also keeping in mind that more and more of our HCPs are going to be millennials or younger.
Right.
Right? And they're technology savvy like nobody, right? They are just so tech savvy. They know how to find information, where to go and, do the work. So my request, humble request to MSL leaders would be, are you in tune with what changes are coming up? Because, I mean, again, I'm speaking it on my own behalf and not anybody else. We're going to see changes that we haven't even imagined or thought about, with generative AI and other things. I mean, less than 5 years, and the roles will look very different. How HCPs get information will look very different in there. So are we in line with those changes? Am I a, change agent? Am I getting my teams ready for those changes, so that when that wave comes, we are ready to, stand up and take those changes and think about those, that how we are going to go and, handle those changes, right? So especially for leaders, it changes the name of the game.
Yeah. And what about MSLs? What advice do you have for MSLs?
So I think for MSLs, every time change comes, I've learned that one lesson in my life, especially during my Novo Nordisk time, time in Novo Nordisk, when the changes were happening, company was growing like exponentially, is that whenever there is a change, you can see it as a challenge or you can see it as opportunity, right? So MSLs who will see opportunities in these changes, who will really embrace generative AI, who will embrace different rules of engagement going forward, who will bounce back from, these changes and these setbacks in their mind, I think will be successful, as compared to MSLs who will resist these changes, who will not, really go and say, okay, I need to, have different rules of engagement, different ways of working. And I think with all these changes coming, and easier said than done, right? That, embrace change, see the opportunity, and, generative AI and all that stuff. But I think in those changing times, change very transformative changes of ways of working, core values will become even more important. They will become even more important. MSLs will have to find their own mantras and their own why to do the important work they do every single day. Why do I go out and do this work? What does it, do for me? What drives me? I think those mantras for MSLs will become even more important.
Totally agree. Yeah. Renu, you were awesome. This was like the fastest 30 something minutes that we've had. So I appreciate you and all your insights. This was really great. I learned a lot. And I look forward to seeing you at MAPS.
Yes, same here. Same here. Yes, looking forward to meeting all, our colleagues and networking, and of course, learning and growing. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Always appreciate your support. If you got value out of this, please share it with your friends and your colleagues. And as always, we appreciate you. So we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening to the show. And if you enjoyed it, please subscribe so that you don't miss an episode in the future. And feel free to leave a rating or a review or a comment. Thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you soon.